In whatever order you wanted, going into last week, the top 6 sides were Sydney, Brisbane, Fremantle, Carlton, the Bulldogs, and Hawthorn. And over round 21, those sides went 2 wins, 4 losses, with the Bulldogs and Brisbane winning their contests, with Hawthorn going down to GWS by a couple of points after choking away a 28-point lead, whereas the other 3 losers across the weekend are going to be the main focus of this video. And it was a pretty crazy round 21. I was just thrilled to get 6 out of 9, to be perfectly honest with you. And do you think Hawthorn should be considered a break from this kind of video? The only reason I'm saying yes is that they never spent time as a Premiership contender. The Hawks haven't been in the top 8 yet. So I am kind of giving them a pass. But if you want to be like, well, you're a Hawthorn supporter, you're not holding them accountable. Look, if that's your opinion, I'm not going to change your mind on that or fight you on it. But it is what it is. But it was a pretty crazy weekend. Saturday night, date night. So I dropped the missus's little bloke off at his nanny's house. Went and watched Deadpool and Wolverine, which was just everything that I needed it to be as a fan of those movies. And then we went to General Public in Frankston, where whether it was the arcade games, bowling, or the interactive darts, got a feel for the better half, because she just ran into 2015 Nat 5. It took the piss, did Dazzling, and just checking the footy scores, just going, what the is going on here? I've watched all 3 of these games back, and I want to talk about them. I want to talk about why at round 21, what are the similarities and differences between so many of our contenders forgetting how to play football? And there's a big similarity that, to me, is quite stark. So, let's talk about why our contenders stink. And no, Brisbane and the Bulldogs do not stink. This isn't really about you. I do love what they're doing, though, both of those sides. But let's talk about the 3 that lost in almost inconceivable fashion over the weekend, that being the Swans, the Blues, and the Dockers. So when you've got a game that's decided by 2 points, a game that's decided by 1 point, and a game that's decided by 112 points, trying to find some similarities can be a little bit difficult. And I don't want to be a person that's like reaching. I don't want to reach for fact. I don't really want to reach for opinion either, although we tend to do that from time to time. The massive similarity that all 3 of these clubs got scared about, were no good with, just plainly shit, if you want to go down that path, is the same. And for Sydney, it was the first quarter and a half, and then from there, the ship was sailed. It's pretty hard to say, in the second half they did this wrong. The game was already over at that point. For Freo, as we know, it was the last 15 minutes of official game time, so I think with 14 minutes 52 to go, they were still up by 25 points. And then for Carlton, for mine, it was massively in that second quarter and the first half of the third. All 3 of them made the same mistake in different ways. And purely and simply, it comes down to not having the footy. All 3 teams, and a reason why any team can beat anyone, is simply how you play when you don't have the footy. Think of it like this. GWS conceded 7 goals to Hawthorn on turnover. GWS turned the ball over and the Hawks scored. Now, whilst scoring off turnover is really, really good, what did GWS do that only spawned 2 final quarter goals for the Hawks? Well, number 1, they stopped turning the ball over, which is good. But secondly, they not only looked after the footy, they didn't even give the ball back. GWS didn't have to worry about not having the footy because all they did was had the pill. 5 out of their 7 goals in that last quarter came from Hawthorn's front half. And they picked their way through. They were so dominant with the ball that they didn't have to worry about their game without the ball. Whereas the other 3 teams that lost on the weekend failed miserably when they didn't have the footy. Now, don't get me wrong, there were times with the footy that all 3 teams failed, and I'll talk about that as well. But basically, you want to win finals this year, it's how you play without the footy that is going to determine that. So let's deep dive into that a little bit, and let's start with Carlton. How the hell did they lose this game? So the stats there for the Blues, a little bit iffy. So you think of the +7 in disposal efficiency, sounds great. +52 marks, elite. +74 in uncontested ball, and nearly double-digit clearance differential from stoppage. You beauty. And then you look at the efficiency inside 50, -8%. -26 in headouts, that Tom DeConing factor. But what's so stark to me is that bottom right-hand side. The marks inside 50 were equal to Collingwood, and they had 27 less 1%ers. And that marks inside 50 is key. Curnow, Mackay versus Cox and McStay. And I don't want to have any disrespect to the Collingwood Tools, and Collingwood were fantastic throughout this game. Of course, for Scotty Pendlebury. But also, they were just unreal throughout the game, right? But when Curnow and Mackay are putting up those numbers compared to inferior opponents, you're already in trouble. But with the footy, Carlton didn't start well. As we know, they kicked 5 of the first 6 points. They were all just points. 5 behinds to 1. And then how did they defend that 5th behind? Well, Jeremy Howe chipped it in to Josh Dacos, who got it to Elliott, who got it to Will Hoskin-Elliott, who got it to DeGoey, who kicked the snap on his left foot. Coast to coast, didn't lay a glove on them. And as we know, momentum is a big thing in footy. If you don't take your chances, you will inevitably be punished. And Carlton didn't look close to laying a glove on anyone, especially those broken tackles on Jamie Elliott throughout the middle of the ground. The irony was that without the footy, Nick Dacos found himself in space to kick Collingwood second, and then after all the misses, 8 behinds for the Blues, it took Harry Mackay kicking one out of his ass to get it through with 5 seconds remaining when he kicks it in a way that I think just would have made us all giggle. Really, it was that silly. Sure, some of them were rushed, but Jordan Boyd really should have kicked his in that first quarter. I'm not laying it all on him, and I'm going to talk about the way that game finished in just a sec, but simply not taking your chances was borderline cancerous. And I think their last 10 shots on goal, the Blues, they kicked 8 goals too. You do that in the first quarter, and you're sitting in the top 4, feeling pretty shit odd about yourself, and social media wouldn't be bashing poor Mitch McGovern for a set shot. But I digress. At one stage, both teams had 15 scoring shots, and it was 7-8 to 3-12 for Carlton to be trailing by 20 points. But Carlton's major problem for mine, apart from, of course, their work without the footy, is they concede way too many scores inside their defensive 50. Their midfielders do not defend well at all. Now, whether that's up on the half-forward flank, which was how DeGoey managed to get out the back and kick his second from 45 out, in that second quarter, I think it was, but they also had Lockie Schultz, who kicked one from a forward 50 stoppage in which the Blues just didn't want to defend, and Carlton's defense overall have just not been great for the majority of the back half of this year. But when there is a stoppage in there, you can just walk through, and if there's something that Hawthorn can take advantage of hopefully next week, it's Moore, Ginnivan, Newcomb, Warple, create that forward 50 stoppage game, which the Hawks do so well, and punish the Blues and not letting them get those release kicks. But I will say something nice about the Blues here. Nick Newman in the Mason Cox scuffle, just not taking any shit there. He'll probably get fined for it. I don't know at the time of recording. But I thought that was a massive tick. I like the personality that Mason Cox brings. I know he's not for everyone, but walk the walk, talk the talk. Got to respond. Nick Newman did, so he gets a massive tick for that. Cripps' goal coming out of the ruck was extraordinarily good as well, and you just went, oh, he's going to do it. None of his other midfielders want to play football properly at all. He's going to do it. He's carried them so much before. Is he going to do it again? And then the other Carlton weakness was exposed. Disposals inside 50 were not really leading anywhere. And then up the other end of the ground, Bobby Hill, inside 50, found Will Hoskin-Elliott effectively uncontested to kick his second, and you just went, Collingwood are just cleaner. The Blues are going to have to get on a run in the final quarter and try and pinch it. That's the game they set up for themselves, and they bloody nearly did too. When you think of the goals that didn't go through, And then you look at the Elijah Hollands banana and you can't do much but giggle, I feel like, at that point in time and go, of course he would kick that. It was an outrageously good finish by Matty Owies as well. Sorry, Ollie Hollands was the outrageous finish, but Matty Owies got in on the act there. Finally, some cleanliness inside 50. Motlop found Jack Martin, and then Blake Acres, I think it was, who dribbled one through. So there your 5 goals. One more 30 seconds, throw in, and then Collingwood made 2 big mistakes. And yeah, if we want to social media pile on Mitch McGovern, and again, I'll cover that in just a second, then the 2 big mistakes in that throw-in. Number 1, Darcy Cameron effectively gave up on the shallow throw-in, which isn't great. And then Nick Dacos, and I'm not hanging shit on him because he's Nick Dacos, but he was the closest midfielder in that footage. As soon as Mark Pitnet takes the ball out of the ruck, had no pressure. He effectively got a stumble step to deliver the ball inside 50. No one went to him. Nicky D was the closest. Should have put some pressure on. Mitch McGovern takes the mark, effectively uncontested, 45 out, and then the question gets asked, do you believe in the footy gods? And then do you believe in Mitch McGovern, who has kicked a goal after the siren to draw a game against the Pies, ironically, at the MCG in, I think, 2018. I could be wrong on the year, but it was a fair while ago. And then you watched him come in with the atrocious camera angle. The stutter steps just didn't really look right. And he eventually kicks it out on the full. And considering all of the Blues that were inaccurate over the course of the Collingwood game, I feel for Mitch McGovern in a massive way. I really do, because no one deserves the pile-on that he's been given, and his teammates should not have put him in that scenario in the first place. 3 goals, 12, guys. Like, come on. We're being ridiculous now. And if you think it comes down to that one moment and he shirked from it, personally, I disagree. But the Blues lost because they were not the best team and had worse execution. And given they only really played cohesive team footy for the last 9 minutes, you deserve to lose more often than not. So, and a credit to the Pies, of course, who in their front half were awesome. Throughout the night, they were. And when Will Hoskin-Elliott is playing well, Collingwood just looks so much better between the arcs. It's a lot of pressure to put on a non-superstar, but he was fantastic as well. So from a semi-deep dive point of view, that's how Carlton let it slip. Let's go to the other close game and let's talk about how Freo managed to stuff this up. The ironic thing about Freo is that they did effectively everything right with the stats in the game. Sure, maybe not say that they were the greatest team, but it's not as if we've got pages and pages of bad stats, and even the quarter-by-quarter scores, don't really reflect a team that were in trouble. And like I said earlier on in the video, with 15 minutes left, they're up by 25 points. What the hell happened? Well, there are a few theories here. The first one being Essendon took their chances. You have to take your chances. Essendon did that. They were amazing. But in a world where you have Caleb Sarong, Andy Brayshaw, and Hayden Young, they didn't have Fife. You got to learn to win without Nat Fife, guys. But when you've got those 3 as your starting midfield, what you can't do is lose clearances late. And what you can't do is continually disrespect the one man who was getting clearance after clearance after clearance in the last quarter. And maybe his pay packet at either the Bombers or St Kilda is going up. But if you ever needed a reminder on just how good Dylan Shield can be, go watch his last quarter. And we'll talk about Zach Merritt's centre clearance. But Dylan Shield had 3 massive clearances in the build-up throughout Essendon's comeback. They were extraordinary. Shield and Caldwell helped win a clearance that ended up with Mason Redmond pushing the ball further than it should have been, which was a good thing for the Bombers because Sam Draper was being, well contested, you could say, at the base of the 50, but it's gone further than that. Essendon get a goal. And you're away. You're beautiful. Some really good composure from Archie Roberts, who had some really nice moments. I've loved seeing him throughout. Jai Caldwell, we've talked about. Sam Durham kicked that winning behind. But Dylan Shield, his 3 clearances. So that one there ended up with an Essendon goal. He got another clearance out to Kyle Langford, who ended up delivering to Jade Gresham, who took his chances. Credit to the former Saint. And Shield, Parrish and Caldwell combined for another clearance that ended up in a Kyle Langford goal as well. Massive moments by them. Nick Martin kicked 2 in the last quarter and was absolutely outstanding as well. And Freo's defense did some things wrong. Heath Chapman apparently approached overhead marking like Pakistan approached fielding in the 1990s because just nothing was sticking in his poor hands, Big Heath. And Essendon took advantage. But once they got a little bit of momentum circa GWS, the opposition, Freo, Hawthorn, just couldn't stop them. And out of the middle, it was simply not good enough. And Essendon were able to get the job done. Even that final centre clearance where Merritt just had a step on Hayden Young, and then it became a 2-on-1 contest, gave it off to Sammy Durham, who had a ping. And then massive credit to Sam Draper, who sometimes you don't need to lie on the footy to win a game. Do you, Sam? But credit where it's due. Massive pack mark, and the Bombers helped spoil the party. For effectively 2.5 quarters, the second, third, and the first third of the fourth quarter, Freo were the better side. For the first quarter, it was the Bombers. And then for the last 15 minutes, it was the Bombers in a massive way. And in a 1-point win, sometimes that's all you need. Freo didn't do a lot wrong, but they got it wrong a lot late, and they were punished for it. So, they're the 2 close games done and dusted. And I want to repeat to you what a gentleman who was quite intoxicated yelled, screamed at general public when he checked his scores at the Adelaide Oval. What the fuck is happening to Sydney? Well, if you want the numbers are there. And in that first quarter, Dixon, Horne-Francis and Rosie all gold from a real lack of pressure in the midfield. The one-on-ones, the space that Port Adelaide got in their forward half was extraordinary. Sydney they didn't leave New South Wales. It was extraordinary to think about. And even watching it back, it's amazing when you watch footy live, and especially a result like that. You kind of get swept up in the emotion of it, and you get that kind of long-winded disbelief. Whereas if you know it's coming, the disbelief is a little bit lessened, but the criticism becomes more profound, right? It's like watching a bad movie to someone who hasn't seen it before. They may think it's bad, and they might even laugh along because it's so bad, but you can still take the piss out of it. Whereas you know it's bad, therefore you're just going, oh, I can't believe I'm subjecting myself to this. I call this the Terrifier 1 paradox, because it's fucking awful, this movie. And the second one's not great, but it's better. But Terrifier 1 is god-awful. Anywho, so was Sydney, so stuff them in that respect. But when Sydney didn't have the ball, it's like it didn't matter. And the best way that I can sort of show this off, in a way, is the midfield numbers. Look at what the golden, quad, or the golden quadrant, if you will, of both teams, because no one wants to say golden foursomes on YouTube. But, come on. My God, look at what we're looking at here. Now, this is massive credit to Port as well. Butters, Drew, Wines, and Rosie were absolutely outstanding. And if you want to tell me things like Sydney were down, no, Dane Rampy, Lewis Melican got injured, Daz, you're being harsh. No. Premiership contender, 112 points. No. Absolutely not. A bigger margin than this was North Melbourne in 1983. Lost to Fitzroy by 150 points. This is not okay. Adelaide in 2017 were the last team on top of the ladder to concede the first 10 goals. They did it to North, or 9 goals, I think it was. This isn't okay. Aaron Francis is not the answer. Robbie Fox is not the answer. You want to know why Sydney was chasing Tom Barras so much? This is why. Tom McCartan can't do it all himself, and he already didn't have the greatest of days. But where I think Jack Scrimshaw deserves a lot of credit, because, someone like Nick Blakey, Jack Scrimshaw isn't the rebounder that Nick Blakey is. Nick Blakey ain't a one-on-one defender, I'll give you the tip. Mitch Georgiades gave him a fucking bath on the weekend, and that's going to be a problem, because if he can't rebound and you make him defend, you're going to make Nick Blakey a worse footballer, which is a net positive for you. And Mitch Georgiades was outstanding. The space that Willie Rioli got. The fact they couldn't even defend the goal line, and Jordan Sweet got through there and kicked it off the ground. It was insane. And then with the footy, sure, they couldn't convert, and that's not great. And they eventually did through Heaney, and Hayden McLean kicked a couple, and that's all well and fine. But just like Carlton and just like Freo, on a much more catastrophic and cataclysmic level, without the footy, Sydney were lazy. They were weak. They were awful. And what's making footy tips go crazy and what's making nothing really make sense, although someone did pick Port Adelaide. And I'm not the only one that would have done that. But still, I'm going to take a bit of love for myself, guys. But overall, 3 teams against pretty good opposition, reigning premier. You know, I know the Bombers haven't been great, and after what they served up against St Kilda, it was reasonable that they were going to make a genuine attempt at bouncing back. But Essendon and St Kilda, no one plays better with no pressure on them. So, is what that is. And if you want to lump the Hawks in there because the Giants are a good team, have at it. Doesn't really bother me. But if you do not want to play football the right way when you don't have the ball in hand, you do not deserve to win. And this game is 120 minutes long. And you look at how Brisbane are playing the game. You look at how the Bulldogs are playing. The ability to intercept the footy because you've got the tall timber down there for the Dogs. The fact that Brisbane have been able to defend in between the arcs nearly better than any other team in the competition in the last 12 weeks. You know, I wish I could say it's not that hard to identify, but it's so hard to execute. I'm never going to sit here and go, well, I know this, guys. Why can't you just figure it out? Why don't you just go and do that? Because I'm not that fucking arrogant to be like, guys, just I know everything, go do it. Identifying's easy. Execution's the hard bit. I can't teach and shouldn't be teaching anyone on how to execute it. But if you want a sign of a team in good form, they're the teams that are playing well when they don't have the footy. And right now, that's Brisbane, it's the Bulldogs, and it's the Giants. And that's where we're at. And when you think of games like Carlton and Hawthorn next week, which team's going to be better without the footy? And at the moment, it's Hawthorn. And my big concern is that Curnow, after getting held goalless last week, is probably going to kick 6 and sink Hawthorn's season. But when it comes to my footy tips this round, I feel like I'm going to base a lot of it on who's better without the footy. And I reckon that'll be a really good system going forward. So why do the majority of our contenders suck? Because teams are too inconsistent in their application of a game plan without the footy. And it's making for a footy season that is an inconsistent level of fun to enjoy, in my opinion. You may be loving this year. I love that for you. I'm not disliking the year. It's just more of a frustration of, well, who's good? And that's with apologies to Brisbane and the Bulldogs. And maybe I do just have to shift my thinking and go, let's latch on to Brisbane and ride that, horse into town. Maybe I'll just have to do that. But you don't want to play footy without the ball in your hand? Bye-bye. It's going to be a very short September for some teams that don't want to apply themselves on both sides of the ball. And even you could argue on all 3 sides with the ball in dispute as well. So that's kind of my rant just about over. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you took some things out of this video so much that you'd like to comment them down below. Whether you agree, disagree, you're frustrated, angry, you're confused. You want to tell me to go forth and get stuffed. Go for your life. Doesn't bother me. Click the like button if you like the video. If you haven't subscribed, go and do so. We're almost at 3,200, which is just nuts as we barrel our way towards hopefully 4K. I got a couple of really cool ideas that I want to put into practice before the next preview, which are doing okay-ish numbers, but I want to finish them off for the home and away season. So I will talk to you guys very soon and might even be able to get an extra video for you out this week. Fingers crossed, hey? Look after yourselves, you absolute legends, and I'll see you next time.